Hey guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at Justino Tweets and at SheKnowsArsenal. Yeah, so we're going to be doing our predictions today, which I was like, okay, I'm running out of time to do this. If I don't do this today, it's not going to matter anymore, right? So I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to let me know what you guys think about the upcoming season. I'll let you guys know what I think. And I also have predictions from Harry, Souls, and George. And so they couldn't make it on the show today, but what we'll do is once the window actually closes, we'll kind of revisit things. I do think predictions change based on what happens in the transfer window. Other teams get stronger. Maybe Arsenal doesn't address certain areas. So it's important to keep in mind that we may have ideas about what we think is going to happen, but things can definitely change based on what happens in the rest of the window. So I'll definitely get them on the show soon, but we're going to go ahead and do our predictions and we're going to go through a couple of things today. We're going to go through our league position, Europa League finish, player of the season, top goal scorer. And then towards the end of the show, if you guys want to, you guys can ask more questions. Maybe some of you guys want to know who's going to be the breakout star. I think last season it might have been Martinelli. He's broken out twice. Um, but maybe you thought it was Emil Smith Rowe, whoever. Do you think it's going to be Vieira? We can talk about that. We can talk about points, goals, all that type of stuff. I want to leave it kind of open ended. But just like in the very beginning, just want to get those kind of like baseline predictions out of the way. I expect to get every single one of these wrong. I never get anything right when it comes to predictions. I think I've only predicted like one or two things right. So, but it's just a bit of fun. It's just a bit of fun. So yeah. There's 120 of you guys in here already, which is amazing. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Let me just very quickly let people know that we're live, that we're rocking and rolling. Um, and just FYI, like when I posted the thumbnail and the title on Twitter, of course, people were triggered by it saying Arsenal to finish third. I will let you know shortly who made those predictions because some of these predictions they're not just it's not just me out here. It's also Harry and Souls and George, and we'll be able to have those conversations. Now, yesterday when I was on the top 6 show, uh, it's once again, most of the rivals think we're gonna come in 5th or 6th. So, no matter really what our transfer window looks like, no matter how good we look in preseason, most rivals do believe that we're still the weaker of, the top 6, and so I think we are still in a position where, you know, maybe we're being underestimated, but I also do think that when you kind of have season upon season of not really making your benchmarks, you can't really blame rivals for not giving you the respect that you feel like you deserve. So it's one of those situations where I do think it's once we prove it, then people will start to treat us differently. But until then, people are still going to say that we're going to slip up at the final hurdle. We'll be right in amongst everybody and then just barely miss out because that's been the story for a while now. So, yeah, but nevertheless, I'm very confident in terms of this upcoming season. I think it's a huge season in terms of, where we are in terms of this process slash project. I know people don't like those words, but that's what it is. And with this project, it's built now. We kind of started from the ground up and it's been a tough ride, finishing 8th, but winning an FA Cup, finishing 8th again, but doing kind of poor in the cups, then finishing 5th, barely missing out on top 4. And now we're at in this season where, you can really look at the team and say, this is Arteta's team. Yes, we're still probably missing some key pieces like a backup to Thomas Partey or some sort of different option. We may be missing another attacker, maybe a right back, a left-sided center back. But ultimately, when you look at the team and you look at what we have in terms of depth, this isn't a team that looks like it's very far off. So the difference between Arsenal getting to where they want to go and not is probably going to come down to what the manager does in terms of utilizing his squad. Sometimes that is just the difference. Everybody's going to get injuries. Everybody's going to have some unlucky moments. Every top 6 team is playing in multiple competitions, but it's going to be about how he gets this team to perform, Mikel Arteta. And so I think there's a lot of eyes on on us, on Arsenal as the team that's under quote unquote the most pressure, because I think a lot of people assume that if Mikel Arteta doesn't make the top 4 or doesn't qualify for Champions League in some capacity, then he'll be out the door. Now, do I necessarily believe that? No, not necessarily. I think there's a genuine conversation that needs to be had around Arsenal improving and everybody else improving around us and maybe not making the top 4. And is that failure? That kind of stuff, that is a big conversation. Um, because, everybody else gets to have transfer windows as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we haven't gotten better or we stagnated. We just haven't improved as much as the rest of our contemporaries. I'm just putting that out there. So I look at it like I think the club will probably look at it that way. Have we improved? Um, did we meet our points tallies and things like that? Like how close were we and things like that? But in terms of the fan base, I think that's where some of the fan base might feel like we need to go in a different direction, because if you spent 400 odd million, you have your own squad. Um, and we've had 2 seasons where we've been able to compete for top 4 with the team that we have. Yeah, I do see a parts of the fan base thinking that maybe the difference between us making it and not, maybe the manager. So it is a big season in regards to that. But I think we have every opportunity to make our benchmarks with what we have currently without the center midfielder and without the additional attacker. Um, of course, more things would have to go in our way, like Gabriel Jesus would have to be fit for most of the season. We'd have to avoid the inevitable injury to Thomas Partey. Um, you know, we would have to get a little bit of luck there, but maybe another team slips out of the top 4 that we haven't really thought would. But it's there. It's there. It's definitely there, and I don't think we can look at our team right now and lie to ourselves and say that we're not good enough to make the top 4, regardless of what everybody else does, you know? So that's kinda where I sit with that. There's just yeah, I like what I've seen with it from the team last season and in preseason. There was a period last season where we were unplayable, but it was before Lacazette fell off of his, um athletic cliff per se, like, he just could not do it anymore, and he was not scoring goals, and you have to have a center forward that scores goals. They need to contribute, and Gabriel Jesus looks like a player that's gonna contribute. Lacazette got what, 4 goals in the Premier League? Gabriel Jesus could get 15. That could be the difference between top 4 and not. You have Martinelli and Saka improving. Hopefully they improve their goal tallies and things like that. You have backup for Martin Odegaard. So when, Odegaard has those games where maybe he doesn't show up, you have Vieira that can come in and do a job there. Thomas Partey and Granit Xhaka's partnership is stronger than ever. And then you have backups in fullback positions now with Ben White playing at right back, um, and Zinchenko. Now Tomiyasu and Tierney are also there. So you have some things there. So the squad is definitely there. It's good enough, and it was playing like a team that's good enough. So we have to see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the season. You guys can let me know if you're excited, nervous, what. Lord Gunnar says, I still think we need one more striker, as the drop off to Eddie is huge. Is it huge, though? Is it huge? In this preseason, can you not say that you've seen something different from Eddie and Kedia? Am I saying he's as good as Gabriel Jesus? No. But when I see comments like the drop off between Gabriel Jesus and Eddie and Kedia is massive, the difference between Xhaka and the rest of the starting 11 is massive. I think those are over exaggerations. I think those players are not as good as some of the other players, but the drop off is not so bad where they can't play with this team. So, would you wanna see a long period of time with Eddie Nketiah? Probably not, but the idea that the drop off is just so grand, I don't think it's actually that, especially from what we've seen in preseason, and the back end of last season. I do think some people need to reevaluate what they think about Eddie Nketiah, update their their hard drive in terms of Eddie Nketiah. He's no longer the same player that he was 2 years ago, and so I think it's just important to be, fair to him. No, I don't want him to play the entire season, but the drop off is this like scary drop off? I don't really see that. I don't really see that as like as devastating as people make it seem, because when you say the drop off is so massive, I'm thinking that you're basically saying Eddie Nketiah can't score goals in the Premier League. That's what you're saying. If the drop off between Gabriel Jesus and Eddie is so big the way that you guys are saying, then basically what you're saying is that you don't think he's going to score goals in the Premier League. He's not up to the standard of a Premier League striker. And we know that's not true. So, yes, he's not Gabriel Jesus, but can he score? Yeah, he can score goals. Can he deputize for Gabriel Jesus, if he needs a couple of games off? Probably, especially playing with a better team. So I don't buy into this whole Eddie Nketiah is just like so terrible. I think we need another attacker, but another striker, I don't necessarily think we need. I think we need a winger to underpin Bukayo Saka, maybe even somebody that can play through the center. But the idea that Eddie Nketiah is like this academy kid or something like that, for me, it doesn't wash for me. It doesn't wash for me. Yo-Yo says, "There's a drop-off at all of our rivals. Good luck at Spurs, United, West Ham, Chelsea, etc." That's a very good point. Um, I don't think there's very many teams in the league that have similar quality in their backups or their backup strikers than they do their number one. And so, again, we just need Eddie Nketiah to be able to play, a couple of games for Gabriel Jesus, maybe start in the cup games and things like that. He's He's well equipped to do that. The idea that he can't do it and we need to go out there and spend 30, 40 million on another striker, to me is just a no for me, because we could spend that on a center midfielder. We can spend that on a winger. Again, we don't have somebody that can really deputize for Bukayo Saka. Um, we need more depth and quality, I think, in those wide positions more than anything. So, yeah, I think I disagree just a little bit. Bilal says, "Been watching your videos for a while. Some excellent content here. Goals will come not only from our strikers, but a variety of positions." I agree with that, Bilal. Thank you so much for your super chat. But yeah, I hear what you guys are saying. In terms of there is a difference between Gabriel Jesus and Eddie Nketiah. But comments like this, Newman, that Nketiah is worse than Werner, is not actually true. Like we all know that that's not true. Timo Werner couldn't, you know, he couldn't. I was about to say a bad joke. I'm not going to say it, but Eddie Nketiah can score goals in the Premier League. That's what we're talking about, right? So let's not be disingenuous here. Um, but in terms of what we have right now, um, it's good enough to make top 4, but some things will have to go our way. We have to hope that maybe somebody is not as good as we think and people stay fit. William says, "Whoever wins the league and gets top 4 is down to whoever has a good squad, especially with the World Cup breaking the season. So if we have a good squad, we meet our targets." I agree. It's that Winter World Cup is going to be very interesting because you can think of it two ways. You can think of it as like teams that have a lot of players coming back from. So essentially, if you make the final of the World Cup, you have a week to get back to your teams. So I mean, you can't really predict who's going to get to those latter stages of the World Cup. But let's just say Premier League teams that have a lot of maybe French players, maybe Brazilian players in their squad, Argentinian players, maybe German players. I'm just spitballing here, but those are the teams that may have their players out for a lot longer. You think about Arsenal and the position that we're in. Uh, we have quite a few players that might be on that Brazilian national team. So I wonder about what they'll be like coming back in. That's where players like Eddie Nketiah will become really important to the squad. He may make the Ghanaian national team. So if he does, then he's gone as well. So and it's funny because Arsenal just a couple years ago was a team that didn't have any internationals. They had like maybe one, two, three. Saka breaking into the England national team was like, wow, we finally have somebody out there. Now it's going to be almost the entire team. And that's where, like, I'm looking at the team and I'm like, okay, who's going to be sitting at home? Zinchenko, Tierney, potentially Vieira, Odegaard. That might work to our advantage. So, I do think players are gonna come back from that Winter World Cup and maybe be a little bit beat up, and so that has to be managed. That has to be managed very, very well. Also depends on if your players are gonna get a lot of minutes. So, like, somebody like Martinelli, I don't imagine will get a lot of minutes for Brazil, but somebody like Gabriel Jesus probably will. Gabriel might not get a lot of minutes, because really it's probably gonna be Thiago Silva and Marquinhos starting, so a lot of that is gonna come into play as well, but it's all about managing the squad, keeping everybody as fresh as possible, making sure you have the depth, and I think Arsenal have okay depth, but we could probably do a little bit better, right? Um, so let's see, but yeah, there's almost 300 of you guys in here, which is amazing. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of everything. Um, and let's start off with why don't we start off with the Europa League? Let's start off there. What are your guys' expectations of Arsenal in the Europa League? Um, we've been in a final and semifinal as well. Um, and so at some point, we gotta maybe win it. I think in the Europa League is one of those where there's a lot of benefits to being in it. I think we suffered a lot by not being in it, and I know that that might sound counterintuitive because Arsenal was looked at as a team last season that couldn't handle being in multiple competitions. But I do think Sambi, Nuno, players like that not getting playing time throughout the season and circumstances that were beneficial to them hurt us in the stretch because when you needed to use them, the pressure was just too much and they hadn't played enough. So ideally, playing in the Europa League will give those players, obviously Nuno is on loan now, but players like Sambi, Vieira, players that aren't going to play a lot of minutes, all like right off bat, to keep them fresh early on. Uh, but in terms of how far do we need to go in that competition, I mean, gotta say you gotta get to the final, right? When you look at the teams that are in it, there's gonna be good teams. Like the teams that are already in there are good, but the teams from the Champions League are gonna drop down. And so the competition is not as easy or as straightforward as it used to be. Nevertheless, Arsenal need to be serious. They need to be serious. Arsenal need to be serious and try to get into that final and win it. I still think that there are very deep scars from Baku and very deep scars from Villarreal. Villarreal was very winnable scenario that really just highlighted maybe Arteta's inability to work within his squad, to make sure that he gets results in difficult circumstances without his number one options. And so that's not going to fly this season. He's gonna have to figure out ways to survive without Thomas Partey. He's gonna have to figure out ways to survive without Gabriel Jesus. It's inevitable that those players will be unavailable at some points. So you don't wanna be playing players in positions that they don't usually play, emptying out your midfield and letting Xhaka play left backs and things like that. I do think that we've highlighted or figured out some of those scenarios, but Arteta definitely needs to have that um, sorted out. And so my expectation for the Europa League is getting to the final. I know you're probably like, just why not win it? It really depends on who we play in the final. I do think that, when you look at certain finals, you can maybe say, okay, if we got to the final and we had to play a team that dropped out from the Champions League and they're a pretty darn good team, then maybe it's like, okay, you know, but if we get to a final and it's, I don't know, I can't even think of a team right now, but you guys know what kind of teams I'm talking about. A team that we don't consider to be on par with us or better. I would expect us to win, and go hard in that competition because I think we've been a little disappointing in it for a club our size. So yeah, I do think that I expect us to get to the final of the Europa League. A lot of people are gonna have us, probably, as maybe semi-favorites with maybe a Roma, Manchester United, teams like that. But I would expect us to get to the final if we're serious. Um, Ben says Roma. Yo-Yo says the Arsenal, consistently failing to win. The Europa is a great stain on his this ownership, having inherited a club competing at the highest level. Um, I agree with that. I feel like we should do better in that competition regardless. And even though, like, I understand exactly why and we haven't won it, I do think that even though I get it, I don't think the team that played in Baku was incapable of beating Chelsea at that point. And my reasoning for that is because we beat them twice throughout the season. So we had everything required to beat Chelsea. We just didn't have the mentality. We had no balls. We went out there and just shit the bed. So I do think there's gonna be there we will have no excuses. We need to do well in that competition. Ben says Frankfurt, that's a team that, did really well, obviously won, the competition last time around, so but I still would imagine if we got to the end, we should feel like we could win it. Morris says Sevilla, Sevilla's a team I would expect us to be. Yeah, and I get that, like, those are the types of teams that have won, but if I see Arsenal versus those teams, I expect us to win. And that's just where I'm at. If Arsenal are serious and consider themselves a Champions League level team, then we should be able to beat those teams in a final. And really, this is probably a separate conversation, but winning is about muscle memory. When you're a serial winner, you get into those scenarios and those muscles kind of click into gear and you remember how to win competitions like that. That's why Real Madrid wins so much in the Champions League, is because that muscle memory just kind of clicks into gear. Another example would be, Barcelona women, considered the best team right now, lost pretty heavily to Lyon, the women's Lyon team in the Champions League final this season, because Lyon has won it 8 times. So even though they weren't considered the best team today, in the Champions League, they're the best team because they have that muscle memory. A lot of their players have won in big games before. And so I do think Arsenal lack players that have won big games before. And so having players like Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko in the team will help. But at some point, these players are going to need to break through that barrier. They're going to need to be able to get into difficult moments and succeed. And so that's how you build that up. And so I would expect our players to have been in difficult moments and know how to um, persevere through that. If these players are as good as we think they are, I would expect them to be able to do that, especially with the help of Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko. Um, Yo-Yo says football heritage. Yep, exactly. Um, let's see. What else? What else? Keenan says Mourinho will go out in the all out in the Europa League. They will be a hard team to beat. They will. And the one thing about Mourinho, it's not really that hard to see, is that he's trying to build somewhat of a English team in Italy. A lot of the players that he's looking at and bringing in are from the Premier League or have played in the Premier League. So it'll be like playing somebody from the Premier League. So yeah, it will be very difficult to beat them. Nevertheless, I still think we should expect to get to a final and at least make a good account of ourselves. Amir says, "I think we'll win it. Third time a charm is third time that is the charm." I mean, I hope so. Make sure you guys are liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Al Hood says Spurs versus Arsenal is written revenge season to destroy Spurs. I mean, ideally, I prefer them to go out of the Champions League a little bit later on so that they don't get to fall into the Europa League. I'd like for them to just go home without any opportunity to win anything further. That would be my hope for them. Gunners TV, Nija says, if we don't get top four, then that's curtains for Arteta. But if we do win the Europa League and sneak into the Champions League, then maybe one more season for him. It's interesting. Like, I was talking to, I forget who I was talking to, but apparently in like different Arsenal group chats, there's been a question being posed to Gooners, and I guess it'd be interesting to ask you guys these same questions. Would you take 17th in a Europa League win? Would you take that? Arsenal finishing 17th and winning the Europa League. Would you take that? Let me know. Um, Wayne says, thank you so much for your super chat as well. Says, believe the need for a Partey replacement is overstated. The problem wasn't that we lost Partey. It was we lost Partey, Tierney, and Tommy at the same time. This season, we don't have that issue with Zinni and White at right back. So I kind of do, I do understand what you're trying to say, that it was kind of like the combination of all those players out at the same time exacerbated things and made it untenable. Um, so if you just have El Neni amongst the starters, you'll be fine. I think my issue with the idea that Thomas Partey is not a single point of failure is that for me he just kind of is. Um Hold on, you guys. What is this? Oh, I don't know what that is. But yeah, I think for me, once you have the midfielder at the bit, because right now we don't have another way to play that's not through Thomas Partey in our buildup. We haven't really figured out a way to kind of hit it long and make that work. Sometimes we do it with Ramsdale, but we're not consistent with it. So can we figure out a way to bypass midfield? Because if you have El Nene sitting at the base of your midfield, you're bypassing it. You're bypassing it, you know? So you can't pass it into him from the center back. So you need to figure out a way to bypass midfield and still get up the pitch. And I do think in difficult grounds away from home, when the opposition is pressing onto El Neni, we can't figure out another way to create chances or at least even build up without Thomas Partey. I still feel like he's a single point of failure. Maybe having Jesus solves that. Maybe having Zinchenko solves some of that. But it's just when I look at our team, I think at home at the Emirates, we could probably do okay with our crowd behind us and stuff like that. Difficult away grounds where they're going to press onto El Neni and we start to try to kick it long, we don't really have the players, at least up top, that are going to fight for those balls. We don't have midfielders that are going to be desperate for second balls. So we tend to just kind of lose possession altogether, not having that link between the defense and the attack. So I still think he's a single point of failure, but I do think had we had Thomas Partey or had we had not lost Tomiyasu and Tierney, we would have been a lot better off. So yeah, I do hear what you're saying. People are saying no. Psalm says no. Jasper says hell no. Billy says absolutely not. Unknown user says yes, I'll take that and sack Arteta. P. White says no way. Alex, so you guys aren't taking Champions League in 17th. You get a trophy. You're a European champion. You're in Champions League. You just finished 17th. You wouldn't take that? Yeah, this is crazy. I can't believe so many of you guys are saying no. No way. Josh says, you lot really think we'll finish third. Get real. Well, I'll tell you who thinks we're going to finish third because not everybody thinks we will, but some people do. Brad says, no way. Michael says, yes. Anike says, hell no. Ben says, yeah, because Champions League. Gerard says, this season would be the return of the Gooners. Reggie says, hard no. Wow. Benny says, no, hell no. It's a resounding no. It's a resounding no. I am surprised. I am shocked that you guys wouldn't take Champions League, a European trophy, and if you had to finish in 17th, then you had to finish in 17th. Dang. I mean, because in order to do that, what I would think is like, okay, in order to do that, I think you just have to, like, almost play your scrubs in the Premier League and then play your best team in every single game during the Europa League. So maybe you would finish 17th. I'm dead. That is so funny. That is so funny. Yeah, I don't think Gooners could handle that. Lynn says, well, Jess, if we won the Europa League, we would have a cup extra funds and in the Champions League. So that is 3 examples. And then all we have to do is what we did last season and move up the table. Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, I just think about, we'd be in Champions League, and I know that I think Gooners wanna see a good cup team and a good league team because we haven't seen both of those together. We've been a good cup team and a bad league team, or okay league team, but a bad cup, like, we haven't had both, so I understand why people are like, "Absolutely not. Absolutely not." Richard says, "The inevitable losses of both Partey and Gabriel Jesus will be huge if we don't bring in another CM, Tielemans, and a versatile wide man in Gakpo or Dennis. The drop in quality is huge." Yeah, I think we're a center midfielder and an attacker light. I'm not really bought into the idea that it has to be a central striker because I said that earlier, but a versatile, like, wide player is something that I would be looking at. Um, we'll see what happens within the next couple of weeks. We've been kind of hearing that Arsenal are focusing on outgoings before they decide to bring in more players. We are on the cusp of seeing Burn Leno, Pablo Marie, and Torreira all leave very in quick succession. We've also seen Balogun go out on a loan and Nuno Tavares. Um, and word on the street is we have one non-homegrown spot available now when those deals are wrapped up. So we'll see what Arsenal do. I hope we're not playing that game where we're really not bringing anybody in, but I would love to see Tielemans come in or some sort of midfielder. So yeah, I do think that we're all kind of in agreement here that the Europa League is an opportunity for Arsenal to show that we're not weak when it comes down to um, getting things done at the business end. And when you think about the business end of the season, Europa League, the end of that competition coincides with the end of the Premier League. So it's kind of like we've been made to pick or choose and hasn't really worked out. We haven't been kind of firing on all fronts, but I would love to see Arsenal in the mix for top 4 and going towards the Europa League final when we get to the business end. And then that's where we'll really see where this Arsenal team is at because we know when the pressure is not really on early on in the season, we can really accumulate the points. We kind of fly through group stages. But when it gets down to business, we haven't had it. We haven't had it. So we'll see where we're at. Lynn says, Jess, I think they have the players lined up, but we have to get rid first. I hope so. I hope so. So yeah, Anike says, I like Arteta and I think the hype about his tactics are real. He just has to prove it this season. I think he should. That's where we're at with Arteta. He needs to prove it now. I do think that there's something there with Arteta where I think he's a very good coach. I don't doubt anything that he's doing on the training pitch. That's where I never doubt Mikel Arteta. I think he knows how to get the boys. He knows the tactics. All the players have said that. Tactically, the guy is spot on and he knows how to get his team set up for a game. And usually when we're not doing things properly within a game, it's because the players have not executed it properly. Where Arteta gets it wrong is with the management. Man management, getting the team up for games. I do think that's a part of what the manager is supposed to be doing. I do think the manager needs to be able to inspire his troops. I think that's a part of it. And also managing the gray areas of the squad, managing the squad players, keeping them fresh, keeping them clued in so that when we need to use them, they're ready to go. And so that's where I think Arteta kind of has maybe faltered. But in terms of tactically, I think he's fine. I think he's actually really good tactically. Um, let's see. Soham says, "Do you think our squad depth is over criticized? Although I do think we need more." I'm with you about we need more, but I do think we haven't really. I think there's some people still believing the squad depth is just Cedric, El Neni. You know, Nuno is kind of is gone now. Still thinking it's the same squad depth from last season, but they're forgetting that our starting back line now includes 2 different players, in William Saliba and, Zinchenko. And so that means that Tierney and Tomiyasu are now options for us in the fullback areas. We didn't have that, and fullback was a huge, disappointment last season because we had to use the likes of Cedric, we had to use Nuno, who is too raw, and so we've kinda seen that become an area that we've improved upon naturally. Then when you look at midfield, it's Vieira, I do think helps because he can play a multitude of positions. He can play on the wings, but he can also play Odegaard's position. So if something happens to Odegaard, we don't function. Similar to Thomas Partey. Not as bad, because you could drop a Emile Smith Rowe in there, but you don't our system just doesn't work without him. So having Vieira in there, who said himself that he's very similar to Odegaard, I do think helps that. And then when you look in the attacking positions, I do think Eddie helps. I think you have Martinelli and you have Saka. Those players are great. Emile Smith Rowe, you have him. So it's just a matter of getting like that one extra attacker and that one extra midfielder just to really firm it up. But I do think it's overstated. But I would rather us be over prepared. I think when you're over prepared, things don't happen to you. When you're underprepared, it happens to you on the first day. That's just me. Um, that's just me. So we're all kind of in the same position. I think everybody knows that this is Arteta's season to show that he can operate in multiple competitions, manage the squad, get us to the latter stages. Most people saying the final of the Europa League. And I also would like to see a deep run in the FA Cup. It was sick last season that we bombed out so early. It really was a disgrace. And I know I saw the team out there. It wasn't great. Patino and Sambi in there, but you gotta manage the squad better. You got to. And do I actually believe that that team had no chance of beating Nottingham Forest? No. And I get that teams from the championship, they live for those moments, the magic of the FA Cup and all that. But we need to be beyond the magic. The magic needs to only happen for us, not for teams that are in the championship against us. So I would like to see a deep run in the FA Cup. 432 of you guys in here like the video. Subscribe to the channel. All right. So, okay. Uh, let's see what we want to talk about next. All right. So let's go into top goal scorer. What you thinking? I think there's an obvious answer here that everybody's going to go for, but I want to see what you guys think about the top goal scorer for Arsenal across the entire season, not just the Premier League. What do you guys think? Top goal scorer. What do you guys think? I think that, you know, okay, so let's just start with just obviously there's some players that need to improve their goal tallies this season. Um, I'm looking at Saka, I'm looking at Martinelli, and I'm looking at Odegaard because I think they're going to start a lot of games. Those three, that front four is probably the front four that's going to start at the beginning of the season. So my expectations of them is that they do better than last season. The thing about Saka is that I do think that he has done pretty well. He did pretty well last season. I think he had what, like 11 goals? Let me just pull it up. Like what? 11 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League. So, I mean, that's pretty freaking good. But with Bukayo, because I think he's going to be playing so many games, he's going to be taking all the penalties. I mean, he's our penalty kick taker now. So with that being said, because Aubameyang was taking penalties and so was Lacazette, that's going to give him an extra what, 3-4 goals. Um, you know, and now his assists are probably going to go up as well, having a more clinical striker around him. So I'm going for I need to see at least 25 goal involvements. Last season he had 18. I think I'm even being a little bit, you know, conservative there, but 25 goal involvements for Bukayo Saka. I think I could look at that and say, you know what, you perform very well. And that's just in the Premier League. Who knows what he'll do in other competitions because we'll actually hopefully be in them for a longer period of time. But for Bukayo, 25 goal involvements is what I would expect. For Martinelli, he's an interesting one because I do think that when you think about some of the things that he did last season, the ball that went just right across the front of the goal against Manchester City. He could have probably had a goal. Um, then he probably could have had a goal or 2 against Liverpool. There's just so many moments that I look at last season where I'm like, "You coulda scored. You coulda scored more." And we know that Martinelli on his day can be really clinical. We saw that in his first season at Arsenal. He was more of a striker then, and now he's more of a winger, but he needs to still have that clinical edge. Last season, 6 goals, 6 assists in the Premier League. That's 12 goal involvements. I think he needs to get up to 20, especially if he's gonna be starting games. 20 goal involvements for Gabriel Martinelli, I think, is baseline for him because he gets in such good positions. He just needs to be more clinical. So, he's somebody that I look at and I'm like, "Okay, could we get you to 12 goals? Could we get you there?" Kinda like a Saka season for Martinelli, and Martinelli going up and Saka going up to that next level. Then you look at somebody like Martin Odegaard. So my thing with Odegaard is that I have very high expectations of him, higher than a lot of the other players. I just think with not with all the hype, but for him being so highly touted as a 16-year-old, the captain of the team, somebody that plays almost every single game, our game really flows through him. It's interesting to me that Arteta tasked Emile Smith Rowe with 15 goals and 15 assists. I would imagine that he would have similar expectations for Martin Odegaard because he plays more than Emile Smith Rowe and he has the quality. So for Odegaard, he had 7 goals and 4 assists. Now, naturally, his assists will go up because he'll have more clinical players in front of him. Um, I think and I think he also needs to, which he has been in preseason, play a little bit more central and be the pass right before the goal. You saw, the ball that he played in, well, I think it might have been to Bukayo Saka before Saka got pushed in the back by one of the Sevilla players. He also had another one that he threaded through really nicely, I think, to Gabriel Jesus in one of those games. I think he's getting closer to the goal and tasking himself a little bit more than being the pass before the pass, being more of the pass. We need more of that from him, more responsibility placed upon the shoulders of Martin Odegaard. He's 23 years old, will be 24 in December. We need to stop treating him like he's a young player. He's more than capable of doing this. So, when I look at Odegaard, I'm thinking 30 goal involvements for Martin Odegaard, something around there. You know, is that too much to ask from somebody that only had 7 goals? Did we not see him in enough positions where if he had just pulled the trigger, that ball might have went in the back of the net? Um, Maybe I'm asking for too much, but I think I'm gonna say, just to be a little bit more conservative, that similar to Bukayo Saka, I'd like to see at least 25 goal involvements from Martin Odegaard, and I would like, you know, half and half, like or you can't really make it half and half, but I would like to see a lot of those be goals as well because he gets in good positions. Then you look at Emile Smith Rowe, who a lot of people are saying is underrated right now. People aren't really thinking about him or thinking that he's going to be a key part of the team. What I'll say about Emile Smith Rowe is that it's hard to be spoken about when you don't play. And so I don't think people are necessarily underrating Emile Smith Rowe. I think he's being put to the back of our minds because he's not fit. But if Emile Smith Rowe, because of the type of player that he is, especially with 5 subs, I think he could be such a good last 20-minute player that finishes off games for us. When we're 1-0 up, 2-0 up, against teams that we should be beating, putting the cherry on top. 10 goals and 2 assists last season. I think his assists need to go up. Um, but beyond that, his assists will naturally go up as well because, he was robbed of assists because, think about the ball that he put into Lacazette on a plate that he missed against Burnley, those types of scenarios. But Emile Smith Rowe could go up another level. I think he could go up to, at least 10 assists and 15 goals, something around that mark. So Emile Smith Rowe is also somebody that's probably going to score a lot of goals, right? Especially with the substitution rule. But I think a lot of people are gonna say Jesus, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because he's gonna be the main striker, he's the guy, and this is where the agendas are gonna start for him from the rivals. and where our expectations are going to be either met or not met. With Gabriel Jesus, his main thing is when he hasn't started, he doesn't score goals, but when he starts and plays 90 minutes, he scores tons of goals. So he'll be doing that with Arsenal. He won't have a Kevin De Bruyne behind him, but I don't think not having Kevin De Bruyne means that all of a sudden his goals are going to be halved. I don't think it's going to be like that. So for me, Gabriel Jesus, I would expect to get at least 20 goals this season in all competitions. Somewhere around there, maybe 15 in the Premier League, something around there, at the bare minimum. But this is somebody that needs to beat the allegations that he underperforms his XG every season. He needs to be finishing off those chances and not overthinking it. One of the things about Gabriel Jesus that I think, Tim Stillman spoke about, that I got kind of the same feelings around, is that with Gabriel Jesus, he was so desperate to prove himself that, you know, he would snatch at opportunities, especially when he came on off the bench after Sergio Aguero went off. And so he needs to just relax. You're the guy, but we need you to perform, but you don't have to try too hard. And so, yeah, with Gabriel Jesus, I would expect him to be our top scorer. You know, I'm banking on him being top scorer. I don't need these things to come back on me, So for me, I think Gabriel Jesus is going to be top scorer. Um, I'm really backing him a lot. I do think that there is still kind of like a feeling amongst some Arsenal fans that he's not going to have enough goals in him, but I do think he has it. So for me, he's going to be our top goal scorer. Lynn says, I would like to see ESR and Vieira play together in the Europa League if we want to change a game in the Premier League, as I see those two linking up well. I see Vieira linking up well with a lot of different players. I think he'll be good with Bukayo. I think he'll be good with Gabriel Martinelli. I think he'll be good with Jesus. And like you said, even maybe ESR. So, yeah. Yo-Yo says Gabriel Jesus simply has to be the difference maker. No stat padding. Fair enough. For me with Gabriel Jesus as well, Yo-Yo makes a really good point, is that you don't really just want to see him be a flat track bully. As much as, and this, you guys, if you were here the other day, there was somebody in the chat that was so angry at me for speaking about Aubameyang, and saying that he fell off, which he did, and what? You gonna fight me? Like, what are you gonna do? So Aubameyang fell off, but Aubameyang on his day was a lethal striker. And for the first 2 years that he played for Arsenal, he was excellent. But what he did end up kind of being was a flat track bully. And he would score tons of goals against the Brightons or the Burnleys and the teams in the bottom half of the table. But what he couldn't really break through that wall of scoring against the Liverpools and the Man Cities and those guys. But I do want to say that to give Aubameyang kind of like an out on that is that we tended not to even be in those games. But if you get one opportunity, don't just, flub it. And there would be opportunities that Aubameyang would get against Man City or Liverpool that he would just not make. And I'm not quite sure why that is. But Gabriel Jesus needs to be the difference maker in the big games. We need to be able to go away from home to the Etihad and Anfield and not look sterile. We need to look like we have players that can hurt the opposition. Gabriel Jesus has scored 5 goals and has got 3 assists against Liverpool. And I get that he was playing for Manchester City, but even if he could score 2 goals for us next season, against Liverpool, that could be the difference between, getting 1 point or none, at Anfield. So I don't expect him to have the exact same potency against Liverpool that, he had with Manchester City. But what I would expect him to do is when he gets in front of goal in those big moments against the big teams, like the moment that we saw Martin Odegaard have at the beginning of the second half against Liverpool, at home. They gave us the ball. Alisson gave Odegaard the ball. He diddled with it, tried to give it to Lacazette, got it taken away. I would expect somebody like Gabriel Jesus to dribble around the goalkeeper and smack it in the back of the net. I think that's the difference that Yo-Yo's talking about. Let's see. T-Bone says, "Yes, Jess, exactly. Kane has no backup on the way to Champions League, and Firmino only had Origi, and they won the Champions League. Eddie is great." I mean, my thing is, like, I feel like when people are saying that Eddie is just so terrible and all this kind of stuff, you cannot possibly think that from what you saw. And can Eddie Nketiah play in the Premier League for Arsenal for a couple of games? Absolutely, he can. Do you want him playing every game? No, you don't. But in terms of backup strikers, I would really task people to give me a team that has a striker like Gabriel Jesus and a backup striker that's, like, just as good and not Manchester City, and not Liverpool. What teams are those? Um, but thank you so much for your super chat. Let's see. P. White says Jesus looks hungry. It's his time to be the main man. 20 plus goals in all competitions. Anike says Jesus is on a mission and he wants the golden boot. I hope he gets it. Lynn says Jesus is not just a goal scorer, he will make space for Saka, Martinelli, and Odegaard to score. And like you say, they have to be putting it away. They do have to be putting it away. And you look at the chances. I mean, we had chances against Liverpool, and we had a lot of chances, not a lot. When I say a lot of when I say chances, we had like two or three openings against you know, uh, Manchester City and Liverpool, not in the home games, or not the first game that we played against Manchester City and not in the first game that we played against Liverpool, but you guys know what games I'm talking about. Plenty of chances, enough chances to stay in the game, and that's the thing, it's like you just have to stay in the game. You just have to make sure it's not a blowout, and I do think that sometimes these blowouts are kind of like because we don't get that one goal when we should have gotten it, and we look back at it, so yeah, there you go. Hector Soul says Jesus just as superstar aura and Aubameyang and Alexis had when they came in. He's better than I would have imagined. Fair enough. Exactly. So I see that somebody's in the chat trying to make this is not really it. Nobody really rates Iheanacho, not even Leicester fans. Watkins and Ings, you are having a laugh. Richarlison and Kane might be kind of close. That might be one that you can look at. And Ronaldo and Martial, that's pretty laughable. Martial is not up to standards. He went out on loan last season. He can't be that good, can he? So I get what you guys are trying to say, but again, the point kind of remains that it's not really and what's funny about that is that you're naming things that are from this season. Martial wasn't here last season, and neither was Richarlison. And the point is could you get through a season without, a backup striker that's at the same level? Kane made it through a season with Spurs without a backup, like somebody else already said, and Martial wasn't even there last season. So you're naming things that are yet to occur, but there's evidence there that you can have decent seasons, not for Manchester United, they were atrocious last season, but from a Spurs perspective, if you wanna use them as an example, they just went through the entire season with Kane, so there you go. There's 460 of you guys in here. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. This is so funny. This is a terrible example. Get out of here. So yeah, next. We all think it's Jesus, right? Gonna be the top scorer, so we can move on from that. Let's go with let's go with where do we think we're gonna finish in the Premier League? Where do you think we're gonna finish, guys? Premier League position. So let me give you guys a little bit of like um just background to why I put Arsenal to finish third. It's because I hear Gooners talking about it. And so I just think it's an interesting conversation to have because do you guys think there's two spots available? There's a lot of people that say that Spurs are nailed on for third. I'm not necessarily thinking that that's 100% true. What is that based on? You know, I'm not sure what's that actually based on beyond the fact that people have seen them buy a lot of players and think, "Okay, that means that they're gonna be 100% better than what they were last season." And the reality is have Spurs improve so much that the gap between them and Arsenal and City or Arsenal, Chelsea, and Man United is gonna be that great, that there won't be more than one spot. That's, I guess, my question, is how many points do you actually think Spurs are gonna improve next season? And do you, because we finished 2 points behind them. That's the reality as well. I think that's really interesting is that I think Spurs finished, like, 3 points behind Chelsea, I could be wrong, and then we finished 2 points behind Spurs, so that's not a lot of points difference. So, what players have Spurs brought in that are gonna give them a gap against the other 3 teams that have also improved, that means that there's only gonna be 1 spot available in the top 4? That's my question, because I think some people are saying that they have it nailed down, and that there's only 1 spot based on the fact that they bought a lot of players, but not actually thinking, have they improved their first team? Forrester, he's not really a he's a backup goalkeeper. Longley, if any of us signed Longley, we'd all be about to I think we'd be about to cry, So I think when I look at it, I'm like, have they improved so much over this transfer window that the gap is so massive that we can't actually talk about third as well? I think third is in play. I think fourth is in play. I think all 4 teams will be fighting for 2 spots. Manchester United, Arsenal, Spurs, and Chelsea will all be fighting for the 2 spots left. And there's going to be 2 really good teams that just are going to have to play Europa League again. And that sucks so much, and I hope it's not Arsenal, but the idea that there's only 1 spot, I think is just based on them buying a lot of players and not actually thinking about the quality. I get the Conte element as well, but, I don't necessarily see that gap being as big as other people. But yeah, that's just me. That's just me. Yo-Yo says 3rd, 4th Europa League win is more or less the same difference. Um, Lynn says Tuchel or Tuchel, how I may be pronouncing it incorrectly. And Conte appeared a little concerned at the way we beat Chelsea and Sevilla. So if 2 elite managers saying we have improved, so that is all I need to know. Yeah, I mean, I take what these managers say with a grain of salt, but I do hear what you're saying. Andrea says, "We will finish first." You heard it here. Newman says, "Kulusevski scored 5 goals and 8 assists and only played half the season." I mean, we've seen a lot of players play a small amount of time and then fade. So, again, like, I remember when people were trying to say that Mendy, the goalkeeper at Chelsea, was world class after half a season, under Tuchel, and now Chelsea fan base is trying to figure out what he is. So, again, like, we wanna make these really quick kind of evaluations of players and not actually, because first and also you have to remember that nobody knew about Kulusevski. We know that when new players come into the league, they need to get found out. People need to start to be able to plan for them. When Saka and Martinelli first came into the team, teams had a hard time figuring those 2 players out. And then they kind of figured them out and then we had to readjust. So even though I think Kulusevski is class, I don't necessarily feel like that means that he's gonna go on to score 20 goals next season. I think he'll also have a period of time where he'll get found out, but that's just my take on that. I think Spurs are gonna be good. I just don't think it's nailed on because they have Kulusevski. Remember, other teams have also improved. That's the thing about saying that, "Oh, it's Spurs because they bought this player and this player and this player." Chelsea have bought Raheem Sterling. Raheem Sterling is 10 times the player that Kulusevski is. We all know that. And of course, it's probably based on like him being around a lot longer and all that kind of stuff. But you also have to look at, they bought Koulibaly. They're probably going to bring in Fofana. They might buy Kukurea. They're looking at De Jong. Manchester United probably they're also looking at De Jong. Probably going to bring in a striker. Arsenal may bring in Tielemans. That takes away some of the, oh, what's going to happen with midfield? What if we get another attacker? So again, when you look at it, I don't see a Spurs side that's so much better than everybody else that third is not in play. I'm not saying that they won't get it. I'm just saying that I don't think like it's not as nailed on as Manchester City and Liverpool are for first and second. That's all I'm saying. Let's see. P. White says, "It's good we got signings in early and had a good preseason." I agree. Brian says, "So you're not making a quick evaluation of Gabriel Jesus?" I just said that I hope that he gets his 15 goals, and that's what kind of my expectations are, but I could also be wrong. So it's not really a quick evaluation, it's just more of like a prediction. But I think what Newman is trying to say is that Kulusevski is gonna be the difference maker, and that's the reason why they're definitely gonna make it into the top 3. All I'm saying is that my prediction for Gabriel Jesus is 15 goals, maybe plus, and I'm hoping that he gets it. So there's a difference between a prediction and something that you're saying is like a nailed on fact. And so I think that's the difference with that there. There is 450 of you guys in here like the video and subscribe to the channel. So yeah, let's see. Blaze says, Jess, I think Arsenal have a chance to make top 4, but what it scared me is that Spurs, United, and Chelsea had better manager who had experience. I mean, this is true. You know, the experience of the manager may be the difference in the conversation. I do think that if we're close and we missed out, there will be questions around Arteta and whether or not we need to get a more experienced manager. So I think that's a fair point. Anike says, I think Arsenal looks the best outside of the top 2. Will tell, obviously, but our starting 11 looks the scariest out of the other 4. I think so. I think I think we've looked the best in preseason, you know, in terms of teams outside of the top 2. I haven't watched a lot of Spurs, but, you know, I haven't really heard people talking about them. But yeah, I think that, like, we've looked good, but I also take it with a grain of salt because, you know, other teams are gonna bring in other players, and that's gonna change the dynamics of things. So, uh, yeah. So, I don't really take too much stock in it, but I do think we looked good the best out of the other teams in preseason, which I think speaks to the fact that this team has been together quite a bit of time. You know, having a full season with this team and then adding the other 2 players in that obviously know the system, I think give us some, you know, a foundation there, you know, but there you go. But again, what I said about Spurs and top 4 and what I think people are missing is because they wanna miss it and they just wanna be hyperbolic, is that I'm not saying that Spurs won't get 3rd. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I don't think that they've improved so much that you can definitively say that 3rd is no longer in play. Like, you can say that 1st and 2nd aren't in play because of Manchester City and Liverpool's dominance. I don't think we've seen anything from Spurs from last season, and the transfers that they've made have not been so good and so much better than what every other team has done that they are nailed on 3rd, the way that people are saying. That's not to say that they won't get it, but I think it's in play. That's my point. So where do we think we're gonna finish? 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th? Where do you guys think we're gonna finish? Um, I think it's such an interesting one because we've looked really good. I think it's gonna be closer than it was last season. Like, I don't think it's gonna be, you know, 5th, and then the next team is gonna be 11 points behind. It's gonna be a lot closer. I think it's gonna be a dogfight. I do think there's gonna be one team that people think are gonna do really well that don't do as good as people expected. There's always a team like that, right? I think there is probably one that's gonna be like that. Um, but my early predictions are that Arsenal will finish 4th. I think we'll finish 4th. I think it'll be really close, you know? Um, so that's kind of as it stands, I think that's where we'll finish. But it's gonna be real, real close. And don't discount West Ham. I think they're gonna be up there really annoying, just like they were season before. Let's see. I said this on the terrace yesterday as well, so anybody who thinks I'm gonna change just because I'm somewhere else is no. I think we're gonna finish 4th, and, Arsenal fans don't have to feel ashamed for thinking that we're gonna finish in the Champions League spot, you know? Let's see, because what's interesting to me is that, like, a team that finished 11 points below us, that hasn't even looked half as good as us in preseason is somehow destined to finish in the top 4, and they showed nothing. So I don't know why Arsenal fans need to be all coy and not I don't think making top 4, that's like a bold prediction or something out of left field. Um, Arsenal fans should feel like we can finish in the top 4. So, and I also wanna read you guys Sol's, Harry, and George's predictions as well. George says we're gonna finish in the top 3. We're gonna be the Europa winners, and Saka's going to be player of the season, and Jesus is gonna be the top scorer. Sol says we're gonna finish 4th, and we're gonna win the Europa League. Um, Odegaard is gonna be the player of the season, and Jesus will score the most goals. Harry says we're gonna finish 3rd. We're gonna get to the semifinals of the Europa League. Jesus for player of the season and top goal scorer. So they're pretty confident there. Dev M says people are underrating our team. They always do. In every like combined 11, there's none of our players are in it. Whenever they do predictions, we're never going to be anywhere near it. And I get that some of that has to do with finishing 8th twice and not really meeting expectations sometimes. But when I look at our team, I see a team that is right on par with everybody else kind of fighting for those last 2 positions. I really don't see anybody being clear of us. I just don't see it. So yeah, let's see. Lynn Simpson says, I think that if the mentality stays strong, I think we will play 4th. Also, we will play 4th. Also, I think Spurs will finish 5th because they are relying on Conte, but he isn't playing on the field. Sohan says, "Just I still worry about our midfield depth. We are a Partey injury away from El Neni and Lakanga." Yeah, I mean, we are kind of still at a single point of failure, but I would say let's just wait until the end of the window and see. I'm still worried about it, but I do think Arsenal will pull something off. Um, Reggie Perry says, "I think Zinchenko can help El Neni in the build-up if Partey is missing." And what I'll say about this, Arsenal have 0 world-class players. Is that, that didn't stop people from thinking West Ham could make the top 4 the last 2 seasons. They don't have any world-class players in their team, but it didn't stop anybody from thinking they had the potential to make it into the top 4 the last 2 seasons. It also didn't stop people from saying that Leicester could finish in the top 4 the season prior. So it only applies to Arsenal that they have no chance because they don't have this and that. I also think that what our players lack is it's not about lacking quality, it's about not being at the top level long enough. I don't think our players are I don't think our players are not world class because they're crap. I just think that they're young. So they haven't really been around long enough to be considered world class. But I don't actually think you need to have world class players in your team to finish in the top 4. Because that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about winning the league. We're talking about top 4. We could have finished in the top 4 last season without a single world class player. Those are facts. And anybody who's gonna try to lie and say that they didn't think that Leicester could have finished in the top 4, there were people saying that they should displace us in the top 6. People thought that they were gonna finish in the top 4 2 years in a row, and they bottled it twice, but they didn't have a single world-class player in their team either. That's why I'm not trying to hear this. It's the sum of the parts. It's the sum of the parts of the team that matters more than the individuals that you have. Of course, the individuals have to have quality, but I don't think that Arsenal not having Ronaldo or not having so and so or not having Kane means that they have no chance to make it in the top 4. I just don't see it that way. And the reality is if you have 2 world-class players, but everybody else is kinda average, but the next team has a bunch of players that are really, really good, but not really some players might be on the cusp of world class, but not really. It's about the sum of your parts. That's what it's really about. Team chemistry, the way that you play, consistency, mentality, those things matter more than having a bunch of world-class players in your team. Remember, Manchester United had how many world-class players in their team last season and finished 11 points behind a team that couldn't have any players in a single combined 11, including top 6 teams. I'm just saying. This whole, like, you need a world-class player in your team, miss me with that. Please, miss me with that. We're talking about, can Arsenal finish in the top 4? We absolutely can. Will it be a dogfight? Absolutely. And I think by the end of the season, we may have players that are considered world class after this season because I think there's some players on our team that are gonna have excellent seasons. Saliba, I'm counting on him to have a really good season. Gabriel Jesus, probably being held back by Manchester City, but has world-class potential. Thomas Partey on his day is world class. Bukayo Saka could probably have a really good season as well. So, not trying to hear any of that. I think that's just another one of those, "You don't have any world-class players." Oh my gosh, come on. You can't possibly think that that's the reason why we can't make top 4. Come on. So, yeah, I think the last one that we're gonna go through is, what do you guys think about player of the season? So this is different than goal scorer, right? Your player of the season doesn't have to be your top scorer. So I want us to get creative with these ones. Because we can choose Gabriel Jesus, and I know a lot of you guys will, but let's think of somebody else. Let's think of somebody else who can have a top season and be player of the season outside of Gabriel Jesus. If you think it's gonna be Gabriel Jesus, fair enough. I think there's some players that could do it for us. Um, Seeing a lot of Saliba. Could be. He could be the difference maker. Because in terms of our back line, I do think the combination of White and Gabriel has been really good. But Saliba brings a gravitas that we haven't had back there. Authority. Like Saliba and Gabriel are really White and Gabriel are really good players, but they didn't have they were kind of there, but Saliba has that next level gravitas. And so he could be the difference maker. And I don't think all the time if you're if a defender is your player of the season, that means that you were getting, peppered or anything like that. I just think he could be the difference maker. So like that. Um, let's see. Zinchenko watched this space. Jermaine says 100% Martinelli is going to explode this season. Noel says Odegaard, Saliba, or Martinelli. Cedric, like that one. Newman says Martinelli has a lot of room for growth. Needs to be his breakout. Needs to be his breakout season. Lynn says Saliba. Keenan says Saliba could honestly beat Saka to young player of the year. That's an interesting one. I think Saliba and Saka both have, and Martinelli to a certain extent as well. I wanna see more from Martinelli, but Saliba does have that, you know, he has that ability that I think a lot of people are gonna be talking about him, whereas, like, I still think people question whether or not Saka is good enough right winger. They question his position, they question if he has enough goals, in order to really be considered, one of the best young wingers, you really have to be, of a certain level, and I think Saka can get there, but when you talk about Saliba, there's not a lot of players that are actually above him that you can look at. So it could very well be Saliba, but, I mean, he's just if he could be I mean, if he's anywhere near what Fofana was in his first season, I think a lot of people are gonna be talking about him. I think he's better than Fofana. Odegaard, Martinelli, sneaking in as player of the season. Yo-Yo says Saka is the first gunner to win back-to-back since the king. Thrice would cement him. Yep. Sports says Martinelli. I think I'll just say this, that I do expect one of the more senior players to step up this season and take the burden off of the back of these young players. Martinelli and Saka are still quite young. I do expect them to have big parts to play, but at some point, it needs to be one of the older players that step up as player of the season. Have no, like, problem if Saliba's young player of the season or anything of like that, but our particular, like, player of the season, I do think at some point the older players need to be that, even though I don't think it will be. Lynn says, "Jess is there. This is where some of the pundits forget, man, you finished 11 points behind us and we missed out with 2 points, a big difference." Yeah, I mean, I do think that people don't actually get any information. They just let their biases make them make stupid comments, and like things like you don't have a single world-class player in your team is like you didn't watch any of last season. Like, let me just pause this really quick. So we're talking about like our player of the season. Player of the season. But I just have to say this, that yesterday on the football terrace, there was a Spurs fan that said, and I quote, Zinchenko and Gabriel Jesus have not contributed in any big games for Manchester City. So what do you expect them to do for you? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying? Is that people let their biases let them make really stupid comments, because I know everybody watched Manchester City's game against Aston Villa last season. I know a lot of people watched Manchester City play against PSG, Manchester City play against Real Madrid, Manchester City play against Liverpool. Those are massive games for them in the Champions League and in the league. Gabriel Jesus had a big part to play in those games, came up with goals. Zinchenko was pretty much the reason why they beat Aston Villa to win the Premier League. And this is why I just think people I have a hard time listening to rivals when it comes to Arsenal, and actually you can say that we bottled it last season. That's fair enough. You can say that when the going gets tough, Arsenal don't have the balls to get it over the line. But what you're not going to tell me is that the players that we just brought in have not contributed to a single big game for Manchester City. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that Arsenal cannot make the top 4 because they don't have a single world-class player when a team that has a lot of world-class players finished 11 points behind us, and we were only 2 points away from getting there. You can't tell me that 3rd is not in play because Spurs bought 6 players, but we bought 2 players coming from the best team in the league. So how are we not closing the gap? Is the gap between us and Spurs that big? It was only 2 points. So that's why I just feel like sometimes the way that people analyze Arsenal just comes straight from their ass and not from their brain. It just can't. You know? Yo-Yo says, I expect a spud to be full of SHIT. Anike says, Jesus scored the goal that made City Centurions in the last minute of the season. Preach. Preach. Be excited, says Zinchenko, massively underrated with a great season. He will play and fill holes on the left whenever needed. Yeah, exactly. So I'm really excited, about this season. I do think player of the season is my guess for this is it's gonna be Saliba. I think he's gonna be the difference maker. I think a lot of people are gonna realize his quality. I think a lot of people wanted him not to come to Arsenal because they knew or come back to Arsenal because they knew he would take us to another level. So just to recap, I think we're gonna finish in the top 4. I expect us to get into the final of the Europa League. Um, in that competition, I think Jesus is gonna be our top scorer and William Saliba is gonna be our player of the season. And, I expect us to I expect Arteta to show his quality this season, that he's learned from his mistakes, because he could very well be the difference between us meeting our targets and not. And if he doesn't get it this season, I don't think I don't think a lot of fans will come back, to him. And he's had time and people have been very patient, so I feel like it's time for him to really show what he's all about. Yo-Yo says point tally prediction. I've kind of said from the beginning that I think we need to be in the mid 70s, mid to high 70s. So I don't have like a point total, but I would say mid to high 70s is where aboutish we need to be, and we need to score at least 15 more goals this season. And I think scoring more goals will help us concede less. I think we kept games too close too long in this past season, and then when you score goals, like, if we're on top, which sometimes we are against the bigger teams, we come out of the gates, but we don't get the goal, then, the game is different once they score 1 goal. And I do think that there's when you look at the team, like the likes of Odegaard and Xhaka and Partey and Gabriel and White are looking up towards the front of the pitch and they see Lacazette. Once you go 1-0 down, you kinda do feel like the game is over. Can't come back, can't do anything. So, I do think that scoring more goals will help us concede less and give us a better opportunity not to give up these, these chances or these leads. Like against Manchester City, had maybe Martinelli scored one of his chances, we would've been 2-0 up and it would have been done from there, potentially. So I think scoring more goals will help that, but mid 70s, mid to high 70s, and at least 15 more goals is where Arsenal need to be. Um, and so that's also why I do think we need at least one more attacker. I think Gabriel Jesus will give us more goals, but I still think to just cement that to make sure that there's not so much pressure on Saka and Martinelli, who are still young players, we need at least one more attacker. P. White says at least 79. I think, yeah, mid to high 70s, you know. Um, Yo-Yo says, I think the Arson the Ars will have a top 3 defensive record, not sure about goals scored. Um, Brian says, my easy answer would be 4th place. However, I will bet for 3rd place and winning the Europa League. The one thing I will say is that my predictions are kind of also like a little bit hopeful. I do think that we will have to kind of not pick or choose, but I think naturally we'll do better in one competition than the other. And so if we go all the way and we get 3rd or 4th in the Premier League, I don't think we will have done as well in the Europa League. That's just my take on that, but ultimately, like, I'm just being a little bit hopeful at the beginning of the season because I do like what I'm seeing. Let's see. Zakaria says, "What about the bench depth versus Spurs, Chelsea? This is where we struggle. You know, we have to wait to see what happens with the rest of the transfer window. If we were to bring in another attacker and another central midfielder, I wouldn't worry about it. People are still talking about right back, but I don't actually think that's a position that we lack too much. Like we don't it's not a trouble area. I think left back was more of an alarming scenario because you knew Tierney was gonna get injured and you had Nuno there, but you can kinda do things at right back now that make up for it, especially because we basically play with a center back at right back, and we have 3 center back type players that can play there, so you don't actually have to play Cedric. In terms of midfield depth, I think we're 1 away. Like, we just need 1 more central midfielder, that can play in the double pivot, that can play a little bit deeper, and that's why I advocate a little bit more for Tielemans than, like, a Paqueta at the moment because we have Vieira, we have Odegaard, we have Emil Smith Rowe. Those players plus Zinchenko can all play in those 8/10 roles. But what we're really lacking is like if Partey were to be out and we needed to kind of revert back to a 4-2-3-1, do we have a midfielder that's kind of press resistant that could play deeper? And I don't think we have that with El Neni or Xhaka. Xhaka has improved a lot and he's played really well, but I still think that he will be a pressing trigger in midfield when if he's deep. So Tielemans can help you with that. So I do think I understand what you're saying about the depth, and that's where we struggle. But as long as we get one more attacker and one more central midfielder, I think we can go into next season feeling pretty confident about our depth, a lot more confident than what we had before. And you also have to think like Sambi is going to get better. I do think Sambi is kind of underrated, and I've been a little bit hard on him as well. But he's done really well in the 8 position in preseason, so I expect him to improve there. Amira says, just can we go unbeaten at home this season, turn the Emirates into a proper fortress? That's only if we can decide not to be idiots against Manchester City and Liverpool and Spurs. I do think we can turn the Emirates into somewhat of a fortress, but you have to be able to be smart against those teams. You can't just pull your panties down. And I do think that against Manchester City at home, we did all the right things, but when it came down to it and it's like we got excited or something and we did the same stuff that we always do, red card, penalty. And so I think it's all about being able to stay calm in those moments where you're ahead and you're playing well and you don't get overexcited. And we could turn it into a fortress. Do I think we'll go unbeaten? No, but I do think we can have a better home record than we did last season, which I do think we had improved at. And I would like to see us just keep games against the bigger teams a lot closer. I don't really want to see any more 4 or 5 goal drubbings against those teams. It's just at this point we should be able to avoid that. Um, Jermaine says, Jess, I'm excited because Jesus scores in big games. Our Arnolito says we are close to beating City, but Liverpool is a different story. Yeah, man. Like Liverpool is just one of those teams where I just think it's the way that they play that we can't really cope with. I do think we did a lot better with them in the first half at home, but it's something about when they turn up, we just can't get up to the speed that they play with. And they have a lot of really experienced players that know what to do. And it just doesn't help when you have players like Mane and Salah that they just eat you for dinner, you know? So Liverpool is a game that I do think that we could get something from, but it's about what we do, is our plan A good enough to withstand them at their best level? And I think our plan A was not good enough to withstand them at their best level. Um, and then we didn't have a plan B that could allow us to stay in the game and maybe nick it, which is something that we had earlier on when Arteta was here. The 3-4-3 bunker in and nick it was something that we had when Arteta first came in, and he really did abandon it. So I do imagine that we'll still kind of struggle with them this coming season, but it's gonna be nice to know that at least Mane won't be elbowing your players in the face. And people are saying Mane is gone. So yeah, doesn't help. Yeah, Jota, I mean, he's just somebody that really turns up against us. So yeah, I think with those teams, it's gonna be about, can Arteta figure out a way to make us more sturdy against those teams away from home? Um, can we not have a brain fart? I do think Ramsdale was so culpable against Liverpool. He just wasn't on it. Like where he was on it against Leicester, he was so not on it against Liverpool. So those kind of things really matter, those fine margins, because we were very much in that game until he just couldn't defend his front post for some reason. Um, and yeah, my I guess my last question for you guys before we get out of here is, who do you think is going to be the breakout player? Who do you think is going to be the player that we talk about this season? Who's going to have the Saka season of 2019? Who's going to have the Emil Smith Rowe season of 2020? Who's going to have the 2021 season of Gabriel Martinelli? Who's going to be the guy that we're talking about this next season as a breakout star that we're going to be like, yeah, this player is it? I'm always interested because my breakout player was actually Martinelli, and I do think he was the breakout player last season. Even though some people are still saying he didn't break out, I do think he broke out last season. I do think that when he came into the team toward in the second half of the season, um, he kept Emil Smith Rowe out of the team. He really did. And if he had had a little bit more end product about him, I do think more people would have talked about him. Saliba, Fabio Vieira, Geoff says Yuri Tielemans, um, Eddie, Saliba, Saliba, Vieira, um, Marquinhos, Saliba, bar none. The man is a superstar in the making. Virgil van Dijk 2.0. Blaze says Jess, Fabio Vieira, Odegaard, Vieira, Eddie, sorry. Defensively, Saliba. Yeah, these are about the players that I thought you guys would talk about. I'm excited. Like, I'm excited about those players that you guys are talking about. My breakout star is gonna be Vieira. It's really a signing that's went under the radar, very much so, and I kinda like it that way because I do think Vieira may need, like, a moment or 2 to get acclimated, but we have signed a superstar. Like, I will put something on that, like, I really will, and I was a little bit like, "Who is this player?" Didn't really know much about him. Watching full games of him, so I didn't just watch compilations, I watched full games of him playing, and as a 21-year-old to be that composed, running games for Porto, obviously, this is more once Luis Diaz left, but he just has it. Like, he just has it. The player is so good, and I think there's a reason why they kept it secret and they went for him and, paid the release clause because this is a player that Arteta was looking at. I do believe in Arteta's talent ID. I do think he knows what players are good and which ones are not. I agree with the Bernardo Silva comparisons as well as the Foden ones, and I just think Vieira is gonna be that player that people have kind of forgot about that we signed, and there's also a reason why Liverpool were looking at him as well. He's very, very good, and, I think he's gonna come in and light a fire under Odegaard's ass as well because he needs some, pressure on him as well to keep him sharp. But Fabio Vieira for me is going to be the breakout player. I do think he's going to come in a little bit later on in the season and people are going to be like, "Oh my gosh, they signed an absolute star." Cuz the guy, again, if you guys have been here, I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks, is that I watched him play in the Europa League against Lyon because I wanted to see him and Paqueta play kind of against each other in midfield, and it was not a contest. Vieira was so much better than Paqueta, so much better. He was composed. His passing was just, it was crisp. It was on time. The texture, everything about what he was doing on the ball was just so beautiful. And I know it's like, what are you talking about? But it's like when you see a player, because George was telling me about him at first, and I was like, I don't know, I don't believe you. And I watched it and I instantly text George and I'm like, you were right. Like, I was like, "This guy is like, he's it," and so I think it's gonna be Vieira. Hopefully, we can see him sooner rather than later, but he's slick, you guys. He's slick, and what he has that Odegaard doesn't really have is the ball striking and um, the clinicalness in the final third, in and around the box. He's somebody that's gonna score goals, and that's why he had, like, 15 goals or something like that last season. I'll actually look it up now. Um, he had view all, let me see. Sorry, he had 8 goals. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He had 6 goals and 14 assists. So he does score goals, but he got a ton of assists, and that's what he likes to do, and I think Vieira is going to be really, really good for Gabriel Jesus, Saka, and Martinelli. So people keep forgetting about Fabio Vieira. We did sign another player that is very good as well. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about him as well. Hakum said, what positions was he playing when you watched him? So, originally he was kind of playing like number 10 and kind of off of the right-hand side. And then as the game went on, he actually came a little bit deeper and was actually more on the left side. He did kind of float a little bit, but he was just he was receiving the ball and dictating play as a 21-year-old, like, for Porto, and he was running the midfield. He was the reason why Porto was kinda getting back into the game. They ultimately still went out of the competition, but they were the much better team, and a lot of it had to do with Fabio Vieira and what he was doing in the midfield. And he has those good one-touch passes, into space for oncoming runners. He has such good vision in terms of his through balls, kind of in between the opposition defense and their goalkeeper to make sure it just dies at the right place so that the attacker can follow it in. And great crossing. His crossing is really, really good. And yeah, he's just a really, really good player. And he's more mobile than Odegaard as well. Like Odegaard's pretty mobile, but Vieira's a little bit more like quick, so he has a little bit of that in him. So yeah, I'm really excited about Vieira as well. He's gonna be my breakout. But we've been talking for about an hour and a half. I think that's long enough. Again, I gave you guys like Souls and George and Harry's predictions as well. I will talk to them about that when the transfer window ends so we can see if they want to change some things up based on what happens at the end of the transfer window. But I've really enjoyed hanging out with you guys as usual. Best part of my day. You guys are absolute stars. Love you all. I'm seeing so many like new names in here, which is insane and I love. Make sure you guys like the video, share this with a friend, all that kind of stuff. And I will be doing uh like reviews of All or Nothing. So you'll get extra episodes from me kind of like reviewing what happens in those episodes of that documentary. And the next, I think that's actually going to be the next piece of content that comes out. Tomorrow we're doing a live event for the Football Terrace. So I'll try to put out something earlier than I did today just so I can make sure I get something out. So yeah, maybe something tomorrow. Hopefully I can get it out, but on Thursday, I'll give you guys something for All or Nothing when the episode comes out. Then on Friday, we'll preview Crystal Palace really quickly, go through our lineups and how we're shitting it because Vieira and what happened last season and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll just roll on into the season because it's here. It's been so quick. And also I'll keep you guys updated on everything that happens in Arsenal's transfer window. So Love you guys, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one.